Give scripture to what Corey said, that's what John talked about. In 1 John, he talked about how his fellowship was with the Son. Yeah. And through fellowshipping with the Son, he had fellowship with the Father. And what he's talking about was, man, I beheld myself in the face of Jesus. That's what he called fellowshipping with the Son. Yeah. Meaning you behold your story, your life in the face of Jesus. Then you see yourself in Jesus, and what happens is that gives birth to the same thoughts in you about yourself and God as Jesus had. And when you start thinking the same things about yourself and the same things about God that Jesus thought, truly your fellowship is with the Father, right? And then you're just engaging in that nonstop. And you begin thinking, the best way to describe it is you begin thinking of God like Abba. And this is shocking for people, but Jesus learned about Abba from the Old Testament. He saw Abba in all the Old Covenant and Old Testament scriptures. He saw Abba there. When he talked about the Good Samaritan, he's talking about Abba. Yeah. Well, where did he learn that from? Where did he get that from?
The Old Testament.
The Old Covenant, the Old Testament. Yeah. But he wasn't looking at it carnally. He was looking at it spiritually. Remember, Paul said the profound thing. We know the law is spiritual. Well, if the law is spiritual, that means it's declaring a truth. You almost want to look at it like this. We still try to do this. We try to look on the law, and we try to look on scriptures like a mathematical formula.
Absolutely.
Instead of a work of art, painting like a whole picture, right. And this part will develop this picture, another part will come in with another, and then you can behold the whole painting. Right? When you look at the scriptures through the Spirit, you're more beholding a work of art. It's more creating like an image for you. It's like painting a portrait of Abba and a portrait of you. Mm-hmm. And then you behold it and you can see all things clearly. And then that can start shaping scripture. Right? But when you try to work it from the bottom up, just like from the covenant up, right. If you say, let me look on the scriptures according to the letter, let me look on them like a mathematical problem or a formula and try to shape yourself and shape Abba like that, you're going to get it all wrong and you're never going to see the beauty of the work of art. Right? Yeah. So Jesus, man, he looked on the Old Covenant and the Old Testament through the eyes of the Spirit. And so he beheld this beautiful portrait of Abba. And the beautiful portrait of Abba was what he described in the Good Samaritan. Yes. Right? What's the greatest commandment in the law? You shall love God and you shall love your neighbor. Who is my neighbor? Well, your enemy. Exactly. And that's the picture that he paints. Because the Samaritans to the Jewish people were their sworn enemies. They hated them. Right. You could not love them. And so then Jesus describes that whole... Jesus is not telling us to go be the Good Samaritan. Man, he's talking about God. God is the Good Samaritan. This is what God does to a person who is an enemy in their mind. Meaning, because they've adopted a wisdom that's contrary to the wisdom of God, they find themselves beaten and bloodied by the thief. And then God comes along as the Good Samaritan. And does God forsake him because he's been beaten and bloodied by the thief? No. Does God forsake him because he's enemies with God in his mind and he finds that his mind has led him into the place where he's gotten beaten on by death? No. God's the Good Samaritan and he loves his neighbor. And the way that he loves them isn't just by thinking in his head, well, I love those guys. The way he loves them is by he comes and picks them up out of their death. And he fills them with oil and wine. Mm-hmm. And he nurtures them back unto life.
At his own expense.
At his own expense.